8.4, volume of a solid. Alright, the key idea is the volume of a rectangular prism is the product of the length, width, and height of the prism. That would be your volume. So it would look like this. It would look like volume equals length times width times height. And it's a lot different than the area because this is what is held inside, your actual solid. So it would be the amount of space inside, not what you could wrap up with wrapping paper like surface area. So let me show you. Here's a rectangular prism. This would be your length. And that's represented with an L. This would be your width. And I'll show you these in just a second, which is represented with a W. And then your height, which is just an H. So, your length, your width, and then your height. So your height would be this, and this, and this, and they're all the same in this case. Your length would be these long ones, okay? All those edges. And then your width would be all the edges this way. Example 1, finding the volumes of a rectangular prism. I should say volume. Alright, here we go. So your directions would say find the volume of each prism, and you would have something that looks like this. Okay, so this is how I want this set up. Just like when we used to write all of our A's, this time we're going to write all of our V's. So if this is the figure, the rectangular prism I'm working with, I'm going to start with writing V equals. I'm going to write the formula every time. Length times width times height. You better get used to doing that because you're going to do it a lot next year. Then I'm going to do V equals. Well, here's where I have to start plugging in for, what is L, what is W, what is H. And going back to the screen before, I put down what those all equal, or how you would find those. So let's look at them. Let's start with our L, length. So when we look over here at our prism, you're going to recognize that you have a number that's represented here. It's 7/8. From here to here is 1/2. And from here to here is 5/8. And they're all within meters. So my length is this one right down here. This is my length, this line. My length in here is 7/8. So I'm going to put 7/8. I'm going to put it in parentheses because we're going to multiply it by W. We're going to multiply it by H. My next one is my width. So I have length, width, and height. So this happens to be my width, and it's 1/2. So I'm going to multiply that by 1/2. And my final one is my height, which happens to be right here. My height is 5/8. Now that I've plugged in all of my numbers, now I can start simplifying. I've got 7/8 times 1/2 times 5/8. So again, you're going to have to do some side math. I'm going to do my volume equals. First thing you're going to solve is 7/8 times 1/2. Remember, we're not dividing, so we don't flip anything. We don't do reciprocals in this case. We just go and we look at the crisscross. If there's nothing that we can solve that way and break it down, we go 7 times 1 is 7. 8 times 2 is 16. So now I plug that in over here, and I put 7/16, and then I still have my 5/8 to worry about, times 5/8. Then I solve that. I'm going to kind of skip a little bit ahead here. When I solve that, I should end up with 7 times 5 is 35, and 16 times 8 is 128. So then once I do that, I have to put my, my label on it. Here's where it's different. Volume, because we're taking and we're this shape here, okay? This, when we're finding the volume, we're finding what all can fit in here. Let's say I had to fill that up with something, some type of solid. All this area in here, the space I can fill is the volume. When I'm talking about surface area, if I got wrapping paper out, and I wrapped it around this entire cube, or I'm sorry, rectangular prism, it's not a cube. If I wrapped it around this entire rectangular prism, that'd be my surface area. And when we talk about area, we square it. Now when we talk about volume, we actually use the 3, which means cubic meters. So our volume is measured in, oops, that's supposed to be a little thing, cubic meters in this case. Or, well, I'm going to erase that. I don't want you to put cubic units, because then you'll know that it can be any units. So volume is measured in cubic units. So for my answer here, and I'm going to put it in different colors so you can see it, 35 over 128, so 35 128th meters cubed. Not squared anymore. This is like a big star. You got to remember. And that's my final answer for that prism. So let's find the volume of one more. I know I'm kind of cutting corners by taking pictures. I apologize. But that way I can get through here a little quicker for you. So now I want to find the volume of this prism. So in order to find this volume of this prism, first thing I need to look at and realize is, oh, well, all 4 of these are the same exact amounts. So what I have to do is start with my V, length times width times height. Why do we use an L like that? Because if I just went like that, it also could look like a 1. So we use a little curly L on that just to kind of help us distinguish the two. Then my next V, I would start plugging in. Well, I've got a lot of numbers that are the same. So I start with my length. My length is right here. It's 3/2. Then I go to my width. It's 3/2. This one's nice and easy. Then I go to my height, and it's also 3/2. Okay, and now I just start the multiplication process and go right in order. Order of operations tells me to go left to right. They're all multiplication anyway. So once I start multiplying them out, okay, I should come up with 27 over 8, which also we could say how many times does 8 go into 27? Well, it goes in 3 whole times. I end up with 3 left over. I use the same denominator. So my volume for this cube equals 3 3/8 inches cubed. Again, that's key. I'm going to erase that because you don't have to put that after everyone, but that's key that you use a 3. If at a test or a quiz you squared it, you would be finding the surface area and it would be completely wrong. It's got to be cubed. It's really important. Example 2 we're going to do is find a missing dimension of a rectangular prism. Okay, so now I have a figure, this rectangular prism, where I have a value that I don't know. So I have to figure out what h is. And so now we're just kind of moving into the algebra portion of it again and solving for an unknown. So let's start with setting it up just the way we always would. Well, first of all, let's point out what we have here, just in case you can't read it. So this line here, my height, that's our unknown. We don't know what it is, so it's used with a variable h. Down here, this line here, this is 16 inches, which would also make this one 16 inches. And that'd be my length. And my width is 7 inches. The other thing they give us is what the volume equals. Well, the volume of this entire rectangular prism happens to be 1,792 inches cubed. Okay, so they've given us that, they've given us a length, they've given us a width. We have to find the height. So we always start with volume equals length times width times height. Do you have to write it? Yes. Write it every time. The next thing is we start plugging in numbers that we know. We know that our length is right here, which happens to be 16. Do we know our width? Let's check it out. Our width is right here, which happens to be 7. And our unknown, which is right here, is h. So do we know what our volume is? Yes. I'm going to put that down in the next one. We know our volume is 1,792. It equals 16 times 7 times h. Thinking about what we can solve, there is part that we can solve. We can say 16 times 7. We can multiply that and get 112. So my 16 times 7 is 112, but I have my h left over. So all I did was solve this right here and drop down my h and filled in what my volume was. Now I'm left with 1,792 equals 112 times h. Now that I have that, you have to look at what we have to do. Remember, the entire goal here is to get h by itself. Okay, that's a really key factor because that's what we talked about when we were doing algebra. So we want to get h all by itself. When I look at 112 and my h, I realize it's multiplication next to each other. So looking back to chapter 7, the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide out my 112 so I get rid of it all. But if I do it on the right side, I'm going to do it on the left side of the equation and divide out 1,792 divided by 112. And what that's doing is it's going to leave this equation over here with h by itself, and 1,792 divided by 112, if you do the side math, it happens to be 16. So with that being said, my answer to what my height should be is 16. Now think about this for a second. We already have the volume. So it wouldn't be 16 inches cubed. It would just happen to be 16 inches. So if I'm going to plug that in up here, it would look like this. 16 inches. It's not squared. It's not cubed. It's just this length right here. And that's how you would solve, just like you did in chapter 7. You would solve for the unknown. You want to get those variables all by themselves. Alright, that's the end of this video. Making sure that you're doing this every single time that you write out the volume of something, and really, really, really focusing on the fact that it's cubic units, not squared.